Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a mobile provider is hacked, their customer records are breached, and authorities suspect it was an inside job. Then we'll discuss the NSA-induced crisis of trust we all now collectively share, and then it's a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 127 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on September 12th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, Ting.com and GoDaddy.com. I'll tell you more about both those sponsors as the show goes on. And of course, the live stream is powered by the incredible content distribution network, ScaleEngine.com. Go over to ScaleEngine and check them out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. I got a special treat. I thought, you know what? I'm going to save it. I got an idea. Never mind. I'm not going to show everybody right now, but I do have something else kind of special. I rushed this morning to get BSD Now episode 2 out, so that way we'd have it to show folks during the live stream. So there it is, engineering and powder kegs. I like that. Makes me think something's going to blow up in that episode. So number 2 of BSD Now with you and Chris is out. Alan, I got to say, this is a really great episode. The first episode I liked a lot, but this shows some marked improvement. And, of course, these first few episodes always show that. But I really thought the topics were great. And you guys had the one of the FreeBSD release engineers on, right?
Yes, we had Glenn Barber from the release engineering team, and he's actually now part of the FreeBSD Foundation, or works for the FreeBSD Foundation directly to work on release engineering, and not just release engineering, but release engineering full-time, so that the releases can get more attention and don't have to rely on volunteers for everything.
Well, I hope you guys are pretty excited, because I think the second episode turned out really great.
Yes.
And it was a big show. I was surprised because you guys did things out of order. You did
a little bit.
Yeah, you did the tutorial second, but the tutorial was pretty interesting. It's about building your own local package repository, which is good stuff.
Well, we didn't plan to do it that way, but because the interview had already been done, Chris skipped over it in the show notes and just did the intro to the tutorial. So I was like, we'll just make it work.
Yeah. Very good. Well, speaking of...
I figured it was less editing that way.
Well, no. But it's fine. Well, because I have a template, so I had to move segment bumps around, but it's...
Oh.
I got it also. Hey, Alan. Pro.
Normally it'll be in the right day.
Pro. Well, now, speaking of people who got all handled and might be pros, we heard this morning, the chat room's been talking about it already, that it looks like Vodafone has been compromised, Vodafone Germany, and according to your headline here...
That's Vodafone.
Voda. According to your headline, it looks like it could be an inside job. Is that what's going on?
So some internal servers at Vodafone Germany were compromised, and the data for about 2 million customers was stolen. And from their investigation, it suggests that the attackers had help from the inside.
Uh-oh. That makes sense.
Yeah. So apparently the breach only disclosed information on German customers, because that's all the information that is on the servers in Germany for Vodafone. And if you're a German customer of Vodafone and your information was stolen, you will get notified by traditional, snail mail.
Okay.
I think that's a German law, actually. But yeah, the way the attackers managed to compromise the servers suggests they had help from inside, or that the entire attack happened from inside. Just the amount of knowledge they seem to have about the internal system suggested that they had help or information from somebody inside. But at the same time, if it's advanced persistent threat type thing, if you do surveillance on the network for long enough, you can figure most things out, right? And unless, the admins at Vodafone are doing something really weird, there's standard practices for how you set things up, right? But it seems there's, they know more than they're letting on.
Well, yeah.
In particular, once they turned the evidence they had over to German police, they were quoted as saying, an individual has been identified by the police and their assets have been seized. So they, as to preserve the evidence, they went and arrested the guy and took all his computers. But they don't saying anything more about it at this time.
Oh,
yeah. But the compromised data included the customer's name, address, gender, birth date, bank account number, and bank sort code, and a bunch of other information like that. Although apparently it did not include their mobile phone number, their credit card numbers, or their passwords. They also said that no personal call information or browsing data was accessed by the attackers.
Browsing information. So they have everyone's browsing information on file then.
Yeah, that was something I was wondering. Does that mean that they have a record of every website you visit on your phone, or just, they have a cache for websites that are visited to, for...
Sounds like
say,
it. I don't know. It sounds like maybe it's like an
it seems like
acceleration cache or something. But
yeah, it could be an acceleration cache, or,
But to
so
me,
they're saying
I mean,
that information wasn't taken, but it does seem that they keep a history of websites you go to
right,
on your phone.
Here's the difference, right? So if I have a cache, that's just a general pool of the JPEGs and GIFs on the web. I don't tie that back to a specific account.
And the cache specifically never includes anything marked as private, because the point of the cache is to cache the things that are going to be the same for a second user.
Yeah,
not anything that's going to be specific for one user.
Yeah, the thing that's jumping out at me is it sounds like if it is a cache, they have a way to tie that cache to the specific person. Thereby, if you compromise,
but it sounds
that
more like
account,
that they might be keeping a record of websites you visit on your phone.
This is what I'm thinking. Yeah.
But specific, or maybe they're just disclaiming, making sure that people don't think that the attacker managed to get that. Right?
Yeah.
Not that,
I don't know. I wouldn't.
But yeah, the way it's worded, it's like, if they were keeping track, you think they wouldn't have said that, right? Because it kind of suggests that they are keeping track, and maybe they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're being forced to, and they wanted to.
Well, that's what I wonder. Like Mr. Finland in the chat room saying is ISPs in Europe have to log citizens' web history. So maybe this is something that, just you and I being outside that. We're not German Vodafone customers. So, Voda.
Yes. But yeah, because they didn't get the person's mobile phone number, so they haven't tied the name to a phone number yet. Although Google can help with that oftentimes, especially when you have the person's name, address, and birth date. But it seems unlikely, or Vodafone says it's unlikely that somebody would be able to steal money out of your bank account just with the information that was compromised. But they are recommending people be very careful of phishing scams coming up soon, especially if they have your name and address and your birth date and your bank account information, they could make a very convincing email that looks like it's coming from your bank or something.
Oh yeah.
And so they're warning you against that. Apparently, the attack was originally discovered on September 5th, but the police asked the company not to announce it right away, so they could do their investigation and seize the computers of the suspect before they knew that anybody was onto them.
That's interesting. So don't. So they're telling the company, not even just the press, but they're telling the company, don't say anything. And I'm sure the company's more than happy to oblige because they want to get this guy caught.
Well, I think if they're not asked by the police, there's laws and data safety laws in Germany that require them to notify their customers, or at least notify the government. So they notified the police first, and then anyway. But it's only been a couple of days, so if this attack had started months ago and then we didn't find about it till now, that would be a problem. But a couple of days to give the police time to seize something, I'm okay with that. Yeah,
and they say they plan to beef up their security and say it only affects the Germany branch. No other countries are affected yet.
The German news agency DPA reports that the suspect had worked for a contractor of the company and wasn't actually a Vodafone employee.
Man, it is getting rough out there to be a contractor these days. I mean,
or if you're a company and you use contractors, you need something like the Fudu we talked about the other week that keeps track of what they're doing, so that you have an audit trail so you can prove this stuff or catch it before it leads to this compromise. But also, after a compromise, you can go back and see who opened that port on the firewall, or who was snooping around on a server they shouldn't have been on at all, and things like that.
I think a lot of times this happens in larger bureaucratic companies because a lot of times they'll lean on contractors to execute a portion of their business that has become stagnant, and then they get lazy and they hire a lot of contractors, and then they don't have the same vetting process, because then a lot of times that vetting process is up to the contracting company when they're doing the hiring.
Yeah, so Vodafone picks a contractor, and then the contractor will start hiring people, and maybe they're not up to the same security standards.
I mean, I think when everybody thinks of a contractor and security breaches, they think of Snowden. And one of the things we've learned is Snowden was breaking into the systems as a Dell contractor. Then, after violating the NSA systems, obviously for public good, but after doing that, he was then hired by Booz Allen. He'd already been in their systems and breached the rules, and then continued to do so as Booz Allen. Obviously, there wasn't the right systems in place there, and this kind of thing happens all the time. You can get in there as a contractor, you have full access. A lot of times you come in and what you need to do is root or administrative level stuff, and there's really no accounting for what you do while you're in there. It's weird because there's cases where they don't even give employees that much trust. It's almost like because they have an easier way of firing you, they're a little more willing to let you slide, I guess.
Or something.
All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
Nope.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to take just a quick moment, if you would allow it, and thank this week's sponsor, or one of this week's sponsors, and that would be Ting.com. Ting is mobile that makes sense, my friends. I've got my HTC One right here, and I was just thinking, I often have this with me pretty much all the time, but one of the things that is really, really handy about having this always-on device is I have set up different screens here that just pull in different information online, and some people, like my wife, hello, are concerned about their data usage. Well, that's why, friends, you need to switch to Ting, because Ting makes this all hassle-free and takes the stress out of things like having a phone that's always updating and pulling feeds online, or checking the latest Google Plus posts, or pulling down your Twitter feeds and syncing your ginormous email accounts. Ting solves that. In fact, the average Ting bill is $21, and the way Ting does billing is really unique. They just take your minutes, your megabytes, and your text messages, they add them all up, and then they bill you for whatever bucket you fall into. At the end of the month, it's just pay for what you use. It's totally fair, and I've told you about the fact that they have included tethering, included hotspot. That's fantastic. No contracts, no early termination fees. That's amazing. I love these things about Ting. There's something else that they've just introduced that is kind of blowing my mind. I don't even know how it's possible for Ting to pull this off. Go over to TechSNAP.ting.com. That's going to take $25 off your first device, and then go over to the blog and check out what Ting is now offering. They will help you get out of your current cell phone provider's contract. They're going to give you up to 25% off your early termination fee if you're getting out of a contract, so that way you can get on the superior Ting service. It's unbelievable. It's super simple. You grab a device, you port your number, and then you submit your early termination claim to Ting, and they will reimburse you up to $75 for that early termination. Now, if you go over to TechSNAP.ting.com, one of the things they have right here on the very front page is a how much would you save calculator. It's very simple to go in there, take your current cell phone bill, plug in the questions and answers, do the little math, and then be astonished at the savings. And then once you decide to pull the trigger, well, Ting's going to help you reduce that early termination fee. And then once you're on Ting, you don't have to worry about contracts. You don't have to have that early termination stress. No mysterious line items on your bill. Unlimited devices on one plan, sharing pooled minutes, and of course that amazing online control panel, plus that no-hold customer support when you call 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. What other cell phone companies are doing this? Nobody's doing this. Also, keep an eye out for that Ting blog, because they announce their Google Hangouts sessions. Does your cell phone provider do Google Hangouts? Because mine does. Yeah, mine does. And it's a great way to find out what they're up to, what they've got coming, and ask any questions or give any comments right to the people that are decision makers right there on the Hangout. Ting has an incredible level of transparency, they have an incredible service, and they have incredible plans and rates, and not to mention some of the best phones on the market. There's nothing I don't love about Ting. They are fantastic. Go over to TechSNAP.ting.com and sign up for a new Ting account and take $25 off your first month of service if you bring your own device. They've got a good page to help you narrow down what devices you can bring. Or if you're signing up for new service, you're going to take $25 off a device. And I might just put in one recommendation. I know I've mentioned it before, but you know what? I love my HTC One. They got a lot of great phones. But how do you beat the HTC One? This is the one phone to rule them all. TechSNAP.ting.com. People love Ting, and you're people too. See? Right there, sister. Yeah. I love that. Because I'm people, Alan. Are you people?
Yes, I pointed that one out to you the other day.
I know. Yes, you did. And I've been running with it ever since, Alan.
Yes,
so,
it's a great line.
Thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. And you guys, seriously, if you've been considering Ting, go check out that new, I guess you could call it ETF relief plan they have, where they'll help you get out of that. How cool is that, Alan?
Yep.
Yeah, man. All right, so
now, if only the U.S. had what Canada has, which new laws that limit the early termination fees to the balance of the what you owe on the device, rather than just hundreds of dollars because they feel like it.
That's nice, because the largest.
But it'd be nice if Canada had Ting too.
Well, yeah, the largest cellular provider in the U.S. Has announced that they are, or already did, I guess, raise their early terminations like another $100. It's crazy. It's totally crazy. All right, so we don't really have this. It's not. The next one is topic is not really so much like a story itself, other than the meta story of the internet crapping themselves over this last revelations from Der Spiegel that the NSA has quote unquote foiled online encryption. Right? I mean, is this sort of like a meta topic you want to tackle?
Kind of. It just there was so many stories on the topic of the NSA and the internet and interfering with encryption and
Subverting
breaking
standards.
protocols and subserving and all that. That I was just like, well, there's no way I can pick one of these stories.
No, yeah, I know, it's incredible.
So I just kind of collected a bunch of different things from a bunch of different people and put it all together, and it's kind of almost more like one of our roundups. Except for it's all on the subject of trust, the internet, encryption, and the NSA, and so on.
Okay. So where do we start?
So I decided to start with the definition of the word trust.
Okay.
Right? Trust is to believe that someone is good and honest and will not harm you, or that something is safe and reliable.
Okay. I would say we have a crisis of trust on the internet right now.
Yes, because can you trust the people, or that write the code? Can you trust the standards? Can you trust the encryption? Can you trust the person on the other end not to be leaking the plain text, even though you're using encryption? Right? You're using encryption, and you know it's right, or it's working, but you don't know if the person who's sending or receiving the data is sending a plain text copy to someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with one of Bruce Schneier's essays, Trust in Man/Machine Security Systems. And so it's one of his posts. I think it's actually an op-ed for Wired, was it? No, this is for the IEEE Security and Privacy publication. And it talks about the way people trust machines and so on.
Yeah, he had another post just recently. I mean, I don't think it was this one, but he's really been kind of just
he's been brought on as like the security expert by
The Guardian.
The Guardian.
Yeah,
and so he's been given access to some of the Snowden documents that haven't been released yet.
Yeah,
some of the ones that are so sensitive they won't be released.
He's been really writing a lot. I mean, great.
Yes,
and
like huge amounts of writing.
He also had a great piece on like as societies sort of whittle down the dangers that face them. We don't have to worry about the bears eating our young anymore, and really like poisonous foods or horrible diseases. The things that remain seem even that much more magnified and worse because they are the remaining threats. So as a society, we are sort of overreacting to what is actually very minimal threats. And he says, that very just basic human nature has sort of been the impetus that has started this whole, protect America at all costs sort of environment.
Like back in August, almost a month ago now, he published one article in Forbes called "Our Decreasing Tolerance to Risk," and it talks about that. Mm-hmm. But also, when I read his book last year, I don't remember which the book was called now.
Liars and Outliers?
No, it was the one before that.
More books by Bruce Schneier. I'll go take a look. Schneier on security?
No, it's not either.
Damn,
I think it was Beyond Fear.
The man has written, Beyond Fear. Here it is. The man has written a lot of books.
Yes.
Yep, there we go. Beyond Fear.
Yeah, Thinking Sensibly About Security in an Uncertain World. I reviewed it on a previous episode of TechSNAP. I read it on my way to BSTCan last year, so it was like spring of 2012.
Yeah.
And it kind of talked about these ideas of how so much of what we do at airports is there to make you think that it's providing security when it's not necessarily, compared to some other places where they do it differently and it works.
Your security theater versus practical
actual
approach,
security. Like he brought up, I think it was Israel and a couple other countries where the airport security actually works. Versus over here where it just makes everything slow and for no reason.
And it's a jobs program.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the article, Trust in Man-Machine Security Systems. It starts off with a little anecdote. He says he stole a visitor's badge from the Eisenhower Executive Office Building in Washington, D.C. last month. The badges are electronic, and they're enabled when you check in with building security. You're supposed to wear it on a chain around your neck at all times and drop it through a slot when you leave. He, being himself, decided to keep it. So he used his body as a shield, and the chain made a satisfying noise when it hit the bottom of the box. So he just gave back the chain, not the card. And so the guard let him through the gate, thinking he returned the security card. The person that behind him had problems, though. Some part of the system knew something was wrong and wouldn't let her out. But eventually the guard just manually override and let the person out, and there was really no follow-up. But he got to take that badge. And, he's like, well, I'm sure it was eventually deactivated and so on, but it just goes to show how that system doesn't necessarily work.
Right, the human element.
Yeah. And it goes on like that. And so the next story we had was Colin Percival wrote a blog entry recently titled, "Don't Trust Me, I Might Be a Spook."
Yeah, I saw this.
Yeah, so he was asked to write an op-ed for, I think, a Canadian paper. And he agreed, and then when he started putting notes together and stuff, he decided that it probably wasn't a good idea. That, while he could write a paper and get it published or whatever, it wouldn't help at all, because why would anybody listen to him? Or why would anybody trust him over somebody else? And it goes on to talk about some things like that. Specifically, he says that part of the security of TechSNAP is that you don't have to trust him.
Right.
Right? You can audit the code of the client, see that it's encrypting before it leaves your machine, and know that even if Colin was working for the NSA, he wouldn't be able to get your files. And he also says, if the NSA did break 2048-bit RSA encryption, that would be a big deal.
Yeah.
But if they break OpenSSL, that's not a big deal. Right? It's if they break the cryptography, that's a big deal. If they break an implementation,
Right.
that's something that we can fix.
Yeah.
Quite easily.
Yeah, it's not the math that's wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it seems oftentimes that the NSA is bypassing the cryptography, right? If they can get Google to give them the plain text or whatever, or give them the logs, then they don't have to sniff it on the wire, because they can just go to the other end and get it. Where previously we trusted that Google wouldn't give away stuff like that.
Yeah, so this is what I think has happened is the NSA generalizes in these presentations and in these notes and these memos. They'll say, we can circumvent encryption. But
Yeah.
that could really mean 100 things. That could mean we go to Google after monitoring the fiber connection and see that Alan Jude emailed Chris Fisher, and we just go to Google and say, hand us over these emails. They sent it over SSL, but we want the raw files off the hard drive. Therefore, they've bypassed encryption, right?
Right. It's not that they
Yeah.
broke the encryption
No.
and can read stuff over that's
And
sent over
didn't you have a
SSL.
story on here that the NSA, or I guess it was the FBI, was asking for expired certificates? And they were collecting
have that.
expired... Okay. I read a story somewhere about
That's
they
an
were
interesting one.
They were collecting expired certificates. Of course, then the idea would be if you capture everything, maybe you could go back in time and decrypt it somehow.
Well, you'd still need the private key, not the
Yeah. Not the public key on the other side.
not the certificate. But yeah, if after Google was done, the government was like, we want the private key
I'll
that
have to
you're
look
not
that
using
up.
anymore. I guess I wouldn't give it up, but if they were forced to or something, they wouldn't necessarily think it was the biggest deal. But yeah, if they have all the traffic captured, they can decrypt it all now.
Yeah, and then there was maybe this is the story I was reading where the CNET article says feds put heat on web firms for master encryption keys.
Yep.
Yeah. The whole thing is, too, it's like, and then maybe in some cases, they do have a backdoor in a commercial product. It's like, it's probably a whole array of ways they bypass encryption.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, Colin says, now we have evidence that the NSA is deliberately sabotaging online security.
Yeah.
Influencing and weakening cryptographic standards, bribing companies to insert backdoors into their software, or even sending developers to accidentally insert bugs into products.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not enough to trust that Colin knows what he's doing. You have to trust that Colin isn't secretly working for the NSA. Or even in the case of Google, they don't necessarily have to get Google to agree to put a backdoor in software. They just need to convince one or two Google developers to make a mistake, or make what looks like a mistake that's actually, purposely causing a weakness.
Right, and there was a story that the NSA has a $250 million budget annually, and where they work with tech companies, and when the tech companies refuse to work with them, they try to do it covertly. And what does that mean? It's got people paranoid. I guess, Elo, the big reaction I've noticed this week is people are really freaking out about that fingerprint reader in the new iPhone.
Yeah, there's quite a few articles on that, but I decided not to cover it because it's,
It's Apple hardware. But
yeah, and
my point is not so much about the phone. My point is there's this skepticism now that people have when something like this comes that wasn't there pre-Snowden leaks. However, I was
but there's two different arguments going on at the same time, and they're not the same thing. Some people are, the security experts are arguing that your fingerprint isn't strong authentication.
right.
And the crazy people are arguing it's all a scam to get your fingerprints.
Right.
It's like, well, if they want your fingerprints, they already have them.
That's my point. Like, they've got mine because I worked at a school district. They probably got yours because you've crossed a border. It's like all this kind of... Like, in the U.S., if you get a passport, they get your fingerprint. It's...
Yeah, well, yeah, like when I flew to Japan, it's like, here's my passport, and they staple in a visa, and they're like, we want your fingerprints in your picture now.
Yeah, some states in the U.S. take your fingerprint when you get a driver's license. Yeah, so...
and, as far as fingerprints being good for authentication, Mythbusters have proven that's not so that's the case.
Yeah.
It's that, they bought all of the different commercial fingerprint scanners they could get, and they defeated most of them with photocopies or Jell-O.
Right. So I guess, but it's interesting, though, to see this trust issue. It's just, trust has been eviscerated.
Yes. And Colin said another thing is most security researchers that work for the NSA never publish anything, right? Because everything's secret.
Yeah.
So he's saying one of the things you can look at to know that maybe Colin doesn't work for the SSA or NSA, because A, he's Canadian, or B, he's published papers, right? In 2005, he wrote the first side channel attack against Intel hyperthreading. Or in 2009, he published a new, the scrypt key derivation function specifically designed to make it harder for the NSA to steal things.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. So yeah, and then he goes on to promote the idea of Linus's law, that with enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, right? And he's saying you don't have to be a security expert to analyze the code. Oftentimes, these bugs are tiny, simple mistakes where maybe only understanding the basics actually makes it easier for you to spot it. Right? Mm-hmm. And he's saying that, for example, with TechSNAP, he pays people that find bugs, right? He's got a bug bounty program that goes right down to the level of he will even pay you for finding typographical errors in his comments in the code. Or actually, I saw he gave a presentation once, and somebody found a typo on his slides during the presentation, and he paid the person. It was like $2, but right, it's the point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so his article's a good read.
Yeah.
And then the next one I had was Russia Today, or RT, on YouTube. They just had an interview with Kevin Mitnick, who's famous for hacking. And, the story goes that he hacked into the NSA, but he didn't. What he had done was hacked into the phone switch of the phone company and started eavesdropping on telephone calls into and out of the NSA.
Oh,
of course,
right. I forgot it was the NSA.
Well, it wasn't just that, but in this one case, he eavesdropped on a call between some man and some woman, one of them being at the NSA, and he listened for about 5 or 10 seconds before he hung up and never did it again. But, at that point, his whole goal was just to see if he could do it, not anything else.
Now, this is an interesting question. She asked me about being tracked in the United States.
So how far can the government go?
I think they have access to everything, at least in the United States, and probably Great Britain. I believe they have access to everything because they basically could intercept all the packets going through the backbone of everything. And now there's been some revelations that they've been pretty resourceful at breaking crypto. So now I think they have access to a ton of stuff.
I don't know.
My first comment when I heard all that was, I feel vindicated for saying basically so much.
Yeah, right? He does, doesn't he?
Really holds true today.
You went to jail for some high-profile hacking, right? Do you think the government is still tracking you after all these years?
Maybe only the Russian government, since I'm here in Moscow. No, I doubt it. You know, something comes up where they think that I can...
I think it's kind of interesting that, I mean, I don't know how much he's following all of this now, but he probably has an interesting perspective, having been on the hard end of all of this in some ways. You know, he spent his time.
Right. It'd be really interesting to have an interview with him when we were looking at the changes to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and the misuse of it and things like that.
You know, one of the things that I can't quite square up is the article talked about how the GCHQ is working on a revolutionary new way to, I think they used the term like gain access to VPNs. Like they have some sort of new technology where they think they've cracked VPNs, and who knows what that means, but it's ominous.
Right. Well, and VPNs is a very generic term.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Is it a
We've known that,
PPTP VPN? Is it an open
we know
VPN?
that PPTP has been pretty bad for a long time.
Exactly.
We also know that they've been specifically targeting routers, like devices.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if your VPN is a hardware VPN,
Right.
and they can
Own the firmware.
root that device,
Yeah.
then yes, they can leak it after the decryption happens.
Yeah.
Right? They can get access to the plain text on one side or the other, or both.
Schneier had an article I know you're going to get to that I think echoes my sentiments exactly. Is the U.S. government has sort of betrayed it. Like they were supposed to be the stewards, in a sense, of the internet.
Right.
And
The U.S. government has betrayed the internet. We need to take it back, was the title.
I don't know exactly what that means, but I feel like the betrayal part is right.
Yeah. And yeah, it's quite a long article in The Guardian or on his website, and it talks about that. And the internet is supposed to be for everyone, not as an intelligence collection tool for the U.S. government. Specifically, as a Canadian, it's like you're not. The U.S. government isn't supposed to be in charge of everything, right?
Well,
it's like I'm not supposed to be subject to their craziness.
I think the unfortunate part is that the U.S. government is actively sharing this with what do they call it? The Five Eyes.
The Five Eyes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're all in. They're all in. GCHQ is sharing with NSA. It came out yesterday that the NSA is wholesale. The NSA is wholesale pre-filtering. It means, i.e., includes domestic. It includes Supreme Court justices. It includes congressmen wholesale delivering NSA collection data to Israel before they remove and filter. And then Israel is only respecting it based on the honor system. There's no technology or even policies in place other than the honor system of what they will look at. So we're almost buying off the other governments with information, right? We're like, well, here, because remember, when they were pressed, they said this eavesdropping has helped stop 56 terror events, only of which a small handful, like a dozen, were in the U.S. The rest were all terror plots, supposedly, outside the U.S., that this information helped stop by working with the governments in those countries.
Right, but what's their definition of a terror event?
Well,
Is it one terrorist phoning another terrorist?
Well, in the two cases they actually outlined for the U.S., one of them was somebody was going to wire money to somebody in another country. A U.S. citizen was going to wire money to somebody else, and that was one of the terror plots because that was going to fund terror. And because that was going to fund terror, that was stopped. So it's pretty weak.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And if that's the examples they could come up with, it means the other 51s were probably even less solid.
Yeah, I would think so.
So Tech Republic has an article called Escaping the Dragnet of Surveillance, and it talks about a previous article we brought up, the one from Paul Honeycamp, about how more encryption isn't the answer. More stuff from Schneier and other security experts, and kind of gives an outline of some of the different
good stuff.
things you can do. Yeah.
I had something kind of like this in the roundup, but which this might kind of make irrelevant in a sense. But I had one from Bruce Schneier on his blog about stuff you can do to.
Nope.
You incorporate
that was going to go in this, but I left it so you could because it was already in the roundup.
Okay.
So
All right. Okay.
there's probably a little bit of overlap, but it's not the same thing.
That's a good article for folks to read, though.
Yep.
You have one in here from Kurt Rodix about the state of encryption, right? Rockerdix? How do you say his name, Alan?
I don't know how you say that.
Rockix?
Roeckx. I'm not sure if that's even a real last name. I've never seen that particular combination of letters before.
I think we should underscore his point here, though, that properly done encryption is still safe.
Yes.
As far as we know.
Properly done encryption is still safe. They'll go after weak things like passwords, bugs in software, and things like that. And some software might contain backdoors. And he also talks about key sizes. So he talks about what's the practical limit for what can be brute force. And he says, at this time, it's probably around 80 bits of security.
Really? That's it?
In 2003, NIST, which is the Standards Institute, said to stop using 80-bit encryption by about 2015. And then in 2005, they said to stop using it by 2010. So, it's already been standard that you should be using stronger encryption than 80-bit since 2010. And that was long before anybody knew any of this stuff was going on. And, before GPU cracking was as near as big a thing as it is now either, right? So he also has a little chart here that kind of compares the levels of symmetric encryption, the regular 128-bit, 256-bit like AES, versus public key cryptography like you would see from RSA and things like GPG and SSL. And it's saying that 2048-bit SSL, or 2040-bit RSA, which is what we use as the basis for SSL, to exchange the password that you then do the 256-bit symmetric encryption with, is equivalent to about 112 bits of encryption. And so maybe we should be kicking that up a bit.
Yeah.
On an interesting note, Bruce Schneier has reissued all of his GPG keys as 4096-bit now.
Maybe we should all do the same.
Yeah. I think mine's been 4096 since like 2010.
Alan, you encryption hipster.
But at that time, it was just the maximum possible value for showing off. It wasn't done on purpose. All it does is make your emails longer.
Yeah, you BSD guys are always emailing with these long emails.
Yeah. But anyway, the article has quite a bit of talk about different things and how useful it is. Another link I don't have in here was there was a question on the Open SSL mailing list the other day about why the random number generator that has been proven that NSA purposely weakened, the dual EC DRBG or whatever,
right?
Why it's still implemented as part of OpenSSL. It's in the FIPS module because certain government standards say you have to use it. And so some customers of OpenSSL are forced to use it when encrypting stuff for the government.
I love that so it's the government stuff that, if anything, because if you put a flaw in there and the bad guys figure out the bad guys can exploit it, but the only systems that are using it are government systems?
Yes.
Genius.
Or specifically, defense contractors and so on that have to communicate with the government and have to follow FIPS standards saying you have to use this encryption system.
I love that I can rest easy knowing that my tax dollars are going to secure my nation properly.
Yes, or to leave security holes on purpose properly.
Oh, right. Yeah, that is the opposite of what my tax dollars should be used for. Huh. Funny.
So I have another Bruce Schneier essay here. It's how advanced is the NSA's cryptanalysis and can we resist it?
That's a good question.
It's, and then The Guardian has another post not by Bruce Schneier, and it's how to foil NSA sabotage.
By Cory Doctorow.
Yes, and it's actually Cory Doctorow's suggestion is use a dead man switch, which actually I think I've seen an ISP in Britain specifically doing about the censorship thing. They have a clause in their terms of service saying, by using us, you opt out of all censorship. And if this clause ever disappears, assume that we're being interfered with.
Interesting. So a dead man switch, is that like I push a button and all of my private data destroys itself?
No, a dead man switch is more like there's a couple of different kinds. The obvious one from a movie is somebody's holding a thing, and if you kill them, they'll let go and it'll set off the bomb.
Yeah, but how do you do that in the context
for example, the other kind is like submarines used to have. They have this buoy that would get launched and send out a distress signal. And it would have like a 12-hour timer. And if you didn't go there and wind it back up and add more time to the clock, when the clock ran out, it would launch and set off the alarm. Right? So that if something happened and the crew wasn't able to reset the timer, then it would call for help.
We've all seen Lost. We know how the thing works.
Okay.
All right.
So this one is
would this be
that
like
the
if
company would post on their website every day that we're not being monitored by the NSA. And so if one day they are monitored by the NSA, they just wouldn't post it. And they wouldn't be violating the gag order saying that you can't tell people that.
So in this, it's like a prearranged little wink nod. Hey, if you see this, or you don't see this.
So basically it's saying, because of the gag order, we won't be able to tell you when we are being monitored. So instead, we will tell you every day that we are not being monitored. And if for some reason we stop telling you we're not being monitored, assume we're being monitored.
Doesn't that just seem like they would come to them and say, look, we saw that you've been doing this. You made us think about this. You need to keep doing this for national security purposes because we need to monitor and we need them to think they're not being monitored so we can watch them because of terrorism.
Right.
9/11.
It'll be harder under the legal framework to make that work.
Al-Qaeda.
So yes, it's not a perfect solution, but everything we could do to make their lives harder is good.
Just think of the children, Alan.
I don't have any.
Well, think of them anyways. Well, that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. It seems like me, though, because I get busy and I just forget to do a post. I like the idea of, like, I wish TrueCrypt had, like, some sort of thing where if I don't visit it and touch it in some way, you know, enter a passcode or reset that counter, that it would wipe all the data. That'd be great. Or my Dropbox.
Right, it's something like that where, and you know, you would get reminders like you have to do this in the next 3 days, or you got 7 days, 3 days, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just these reminders that if you don't keep adding more time to the machine, eventually it will just self-destruct.
Yeah, that would make me feel. Not that I really have anything to worry about, but that would make me feel good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we got some more.
The next one is Matthew Green, who's another security researcher. He has the cryptographyengineering.com, and he has just his thoughts on the NSA and encryption.
Good read. Okay. He actually has a really good one. That is a good post. Okay, Alan, now we got to keep moving because we got more in here.
Yes. So Boing Boing, which I think this one is also related to Cory Doctorow.
Yep.
It's a first-hand account of the NSA sabotaging internet standards.
This is one of the best of the bunch.
Yep.
This guy was involved in the group that was trying to subvert the standard, and he tells his story. He says NSA employees participated throughout and occupied leadership roles in the committee among the editors of the documents. He
Which protocol is this? IPsec, right?
He says every once in a while, someone not an NSA employee who had long-standing ties to the NSA would make a suggestion that reduced privacy or security, but which seemed to make sense when viewed by people who didn't know much about crypto. For example, using the same IV initialization vector throughout a session rather than making a new one for each packet, or retaining a way for encryption protocol to specify that no encryption is to be applied. Oh, interesting. So even just saying, hey, make this protocol so that way we can say don't use any encryption.
Yeah, so what's the point of the IPsec in that case? I guess it's still guaranteeing that the packet hasn't been modified.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And I can see that being useful in some cases, actually, like SSH. We talked about on BSD Now yesterday, the patches for SSH to add the none cipher. You know, there's quite a bit of concern about this idea of, well, why would I want SSH that doesn't encrypt stuff?
Yeah, why would you?
Well, what about when you're doing a file transfer over your LAN?
Yeah, that would be nice.
So, and so, you know, in this case, the none cipher specifically won't engage or will refuse the session if you're actually getting a TTY on the other side.
Has the conversation just been don't use SSH for that?
Not really, because you want SSH to securely log in with like an SSH key.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it keeps the encryption for the login part and then just drops it for the file transfer part.
I see. Well, okay.
So that you could, and so it's very useful. But it's one of the reasons why it's not part of OpenSSH. It's a separate patch still, and will probably remain that way, even though that's harder to maintain. Just because the ideology says that we don't want to have this none option as part of the OpenSSH. Although I'd love to interview the developers about that issues specifically. But anyway, enough of the digression. So yeah, this is memories from when IPsec was being standardized. And in addition to, you know, the sabotage of like adding features like that, specifically, they were talking about, they just kept making it so complex that it would be much easier for people to make mistakes in implementing it. So They basically designed it specifically so there wouldn't be bugs.
To make
So
it
it'd be
hard.
so complicated, people wouldn't be able to make it without bugs in it.
Wow. I guess that sounds like conspiracy theory stuff, but this guy was there.
Yep.
It's not a conspiracy because, first of all, the documents have been leaked, and second of all, here's a guy saying, hey, I was there, I did it. Let me tell you about it. It's just absolutely incredible.
Bruce Schneier actually has an article about the cryptographic evaluation of IPsec from December 2003.
Right.
But in the Boing Boing article, it says that the resulting standard was incredibly complicated, so complex that every real cryptographer who tried to analyze it just threw up their hands and said, "We can't even begin to evaluate this. It's just a mess." So either make it simple so it can be done properly, or you shouldn't trust it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Apparently, people in the chat room have never used Skype before. How do we have people in the TechSNAP audience that don't know how Skype works? Yeah, we're having some packet loss, but it's all right. It'll pick back up. So now the next series of articles kind of get into the range of money.
Well, this one, yeah. So the BBC published a scientific study saying money reduces trust in small groups. And so Schneier applied that to the effect of money on trust in cryptography and the internet.
Uh-huh.
Take the example of Skype.
Right.
It appears from the way the business dealings with Skype went, where it was, the small guys had it, and then they sold it to eBay, and then eBay sold it back to them, and then they sold it to Microsoft, that part of Microsoft's point of buying Skype was to implement the wiretapping so that they could get paid for it.
I almost now wonder if in retrospect, if maybe Skype was being pressured. Okay. So we know Skype was being pressured by the feds.
Pressured to make some way.
Right. To monitor. And Skype would come out and say, there's no way for us to do it without excessive cost. So maybe that's one of the reasons they sold.
And so, so they sold it to Microsoft, and Microsoft's like, we'll just pass, the NSA will pay us to implement the wiretapping part.
Yeah.
So we'll just build up our infrastructure and do it.
Right, and they did exactly that. And Microsoft has a lot of servers, so it wasn't probably a huge cost for them. But they had part of the. So the NSA, they have budget to compensate tech companies for this kind of stuff, which is gross. All right, so we should move on.
So then Ed Felton has an article at freedomtotinker.com more about the NSA apparently undermining standards, security, and confidence, and how this, in the end, may end up having a strong effect on the U.S. economy, right?
Yeah, I've heard that argument.
Cloud computing has been projected to be this huge thing for quite a while, but especially in Europe, how many European governments are going to start saying, sorry, but you're not allowed to store information about our citizens outside of the country because we can't trust the other governments not to be stealing it.
Good for you, Canadians.
We want to be, our company is the only one, or our country is the only one stealing the information we're storing, right?
You guys, really though, Canadians could be...
Well, we have some stuff like that already. One of our customers deals with the Department of Education here, or the Ministry of Education, but the same thing.
Okay.
So they have information about high school students as part of their database. And so we have offsite backups of that, but they specifically have to stay in Canada. So we had to get additional remote locations in Canada instead of just using one of our 20 remote locations we have in the States, because that data is not allowed to leave Canada.
There you go. All right. So we have...
And so the final one we have is another Schneier essay.
I told you, he's been writing like crazy.
Yeah. Americans must sacrifice some security to reform the NSA.
I agree.
And yes, I agree as well.
I think it is a ridiculous concept to think that government can keep us 100% safe, because we have seen horrible events happen since this monitoring's been in place. Boston bombing happened right before we found out about this.
But it's not just that. Is that last little bit of security really worth all of this?
No, it is not.
Exactly.
It's not worth it. I can't believe it. That just feels like such an obvious reality to me. First of all, I don't buy the concept that you can close that gap. So I see this whole NSA stuff as part of trying to close that last small percentage gap where somebody can get us, and I think it's an impossible gap to close.
Exactly. It's a giant waste of billions of dollars.
Yeah,
Or
like 50 of them every year.
another Schneier essay I didn't link in here, but it's on his site. He did a study back a couple of years ago, but he published it again for the 9/11 anniversary yesterday, and basically found that all the people that decided to drive instead of fly after 9/11 because of all of the things that happened,
Yeah.
more people died in the additional car accidents that happened because more people drove
Oh, wow.
than died in the 9/11 attack.
Wow.
Yes.
Is that legit?
Yes. He's got all the numbers there. You can look at it yourself.
That's depressing.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we way overreact when it comes to this kind of stuff.
And that's his point, right? Is always been that we need to look at this stuff rationally, not, people react much more strongly to their fear that something very, very, very rare is going to happen, like a plane crash or a terrorist attack,
Than they do of heart
and
disease.
underreact to the fact that the stats of you dying in a car crash are like 100 times more likely than an airplane crash.
Americans are more likely to die of a Big Mac than they are of a terrorist attack.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or a lightning strike, actually.
Exactly.
So it's all a matter of perspective. And I kind of wonder, and I know I've mentioned it before, I don't mean to beat the drum too much, but I kind of wonder if we won't eventually get to a society where technical elite will retain some level of privacy, and the average users who are not savvy enough to keep up with new developments and to keep up with, practicing good security, they will become sort of the people who are exposed to rampant abusive spying. And we'll have, over time, you got to figure that's going to cause some sort of division. I don't know. To me, it seems like...
But, it comes down to the XKCD comic or the reporter in Egypt. It's like, it doesn't matter how strong your encryption is. If they kidnap you and punch you in the face until you give them the password, then all the encryption was for nothing.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's very true. And I don't want to get punched in the face very much. I have internet shows to do.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
well, maybe, and you know what?
Not the hair, not the hair.
Yeah, don't punch the hair. You know what, Alan? If I ever started getting punched, you know who I'd call?
Who's that?
Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's right. Jean-Claude
That would
Van
be the
Damme.
solution.
Guys, listen, if you need to kick it up a notch, well, we have a great deal for you. GoDaddy is changing things up. They got a new clean look. They got a nice streamlined website, and they've got more features that make them small business friendly than ever. And they've got a great brand new promo code, TECH199, when you check out. We'll get you a .com for $1.99. Now, Jean-Claude Van Damme, if you didn't know this, is an 80s action hero. And he was in a show, and I believe it was called Time Cop, right? Where he goes back in time through, like, they got like this, oh, you didn't see Time Cop?
Not in the last 10 years, no.
Dude does a splits in the kitchen, Alan. Dude is up on the counter doing a splits, and you know what he's doing now? He's getting his .coms for $1.99. My life is like the circle of life. I love it. I love it, and I love the new look. And I think you guys should go over there and use the code TECH199 to get yourself something great. Because look, these kinds of deals are rare. And Alan, you had a great example of if people didn't want to spend $1.99 on a domain.
Well, this was one of the two-letter domain names, which there haven't been any left for quite a while, but IG.com, which was being used by a site in Brazil, which has switched to IG.com.br. But they managed to sell IG.com for $4.7 million.
Wow.
It's like, so you could buy a used.com for $4.7 million, or you could go to GoDaddy and get a new one for $1.99 by using the TechSNAP code.
$1.99. When you get a .com for $1.99.
Remember to use the TechSNAP code.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll cost you $4.7 million.
Tech199 to get that. Look, what's $1.99? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to get one for everything. Get your mama.com, get your dad.com, get your sister, get your brother, get your friends.com, get your aunt, get your uncle. When you're having a party, put it out on the invitation, put a .com on there. Seriously, it's $1.99.
So right there, I guess TechSNAP has saved you about $38 million at that point.
Welcome. And you know what? I would also mention that not only do you get it the first year for $1.99, additional years, $9.99, still a great deal. Still a great deal. So thanks to GoDaddy.com for sponsoring this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. Thanks to you guys.
Use the coupon code, or Jean-Claude Van Damme will want to know why.
Yeah, and I don't know, that man can kick high. I believe he can kick as high as I can stand.
Probably.
Pretty impressive. Could not kick that high. So, Alan, we'll have links to all of those articles in more detail. Like Alan said, it's kind of a roundup version of all the stuff that's been going on. I also gave a little bit of a mini rant about it in Unfilter 66 last night. So we covered some of the stuff there. We also, keeping in the vein of the NSA stuff, it came out that the NSA was sharing phone records with the CIA on American citizens. So we covered that in there too. You know, nice and creepy. Nice and creepy. I want to just mention, I know I gave it a brief mention last week, but over at JupiterBroadcasting.com along the bottom of our website, we've got those affiliate links that you can click on before you shop and then tag your shopping session. So like say, Alan's such a nice guy, if he's buying some memory over at Newegg or doing something on Amazon, he clicks that link first. That way Jupiter Broadcasting gets a little bit of the credit. And we've also got the Chrome and Firefox extensions, which were just updated, so they might have to be reactivated in your browser. So please check. They now include woot.com, as well as some improvements for the Firefox integration, and some niceties on the Chrome side, including being a little bit of a better netizen when you click on an already tagged link. So that way, if you wanted to give somebody else credit for that shopping session, it'll now respect that. So we appreciate all of you guys who grabbed that because it helps us, keeps us going. We had a great download month, and thank God, Scale Engine gives Jupiter Broadcasting a fantastic deal. It really, you know, this would be a good moment also to plug Scale Engine. If you guys are out there in the live stream business, or if you need to speed up your website, you need some hosting, go to ScaleEngine.com. That's this man right here. That's his day job. And how long it's been? It's over a year now. We've been distributing all of our downloads via the Scale Engine CDN, right? I think we just passed.
Oh, the downloads, yeah. I think it's been at least a year.
It's been well over a year for the website.
Oh, yeah, the websites, I think it's been over 2 years. Yeah, it's been since before we started TechSNAP.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But the CDN, I think we crossed the 1 year mark, and it's been
Well, it was when Blip.tv started not letting you have it on your own website.
And now PCBSD is also on the CDN, right?
Yep,
and
for all the ISO, and FreeNAS for the ISO downloads and all the packages and all that stuff.
So if you've got something you need to move around, or if you just need to accelerate the images and HTML on your website, go to ScaleEngine.com. And I also got some great live stream, as our live audience knows, because we're streaming it right now. All right,
I think there's a hockey game going on the other live stream.
Really?
Yeah.
You got a lot of sports. That's interesting.
Yes. It's like German and Swedish hockey leagues or
That's
something
just
like
weird
that.
to me, because here in the U.S., they're like, oh, we can't stream sports online. No, you have to.
Well, some of these are like the second league. Like, you know, you can't really watch like AAA baseball on TV anywhere, right?
I got you. You should have like a master room where all the live feeds just come up on displays, and you just go in there and watch.
I had a page
everything.
like that once, and now there's too many.
Well, yeah, that'd be a lot of Flash players.
Yeah. I think the max I've ever gotten word successfully is probably about 24 on one screen.
And then the computer just starts to...
Well, they get too small after that anyway.
Yeah. It's like that room in The Matrix where the guy was...
Yeah, but that's just all the screens.
Is there anything else we want to cover in the news before we run to the feedback?
Nope.
All right. Very good, then. That means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website, or even better, like our first submitter did, submitting a submission to our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Are you ready for the first one, Alan?
Yep.
All right, it comes from, let's see, I'm going to say Carrie Hartline. I think that's pretty close. I think I got pretty close. He says, I'd like to hear your thoughts on fingerprint scanners. So today, Apple unveiled the iPhone 5S with a shiny fingerprint scanner that everyone is expected to have. It will be used for unlocking the phone, buying things in iTunes, and other forms of authentication. Actually, that's not true. It's just going to be used for those two things so far. It'll also allow for multiple fingers to do authentication. Is this actually a secure thing? How secure should someone feel using this sort of authentication?
Well, in answer to the question I had was, I read somewhere else, somebody was asking, like, so what about people who share their phone with their wife or girlfriend or whatever? Is it going to accept multiple fingers? But
yeah, it does,
yeah. But there's a bunch of other use cases where you might have someone else using your phone or whatever. But anyway, it's kind of just a gimmick, I think, rather than something they should really trust. It'll keep most people out of your phone probably a little better than the 4-digit code.
Well, you know, I think people are maybe looking at it in the wrong way. So I think what the dirty secret is about smartphones, and Apple claims they had usage data on this, that the majority, I was something like 70% or something like that, are not using any passcode to get into their phone. So I would argue
No
this,
lock screen at all.
yeah. So this is probably better than nothing.
Right, but if those people are opting to have no lock screen,
It's because of the
forcing them to
inconvenience.
have one isn't
Well, no,
necessary.
because so there's this is the thing I think is interesting about it is the way they've integrated is it's so if you've got an iPhone, you know, when you touch that button the iPhone has, it just scans it as you touch it. So you touch that button to wake it up anyways. So it authenticates as you wake up the screen. I think that's kind of neat. I don't know.
How does it deal with if you get a cut on your finger? How does it deal with the fact that eventually that thing's going to get gummed up to the point it's not going to be able to read your fingerprint?
Yeah, that would be on you to make sure you've got multiple fingerprints. And you're right. The other thing is, does it get gummed up? Because this is like a button and a fingerprint scanner in one. I was looking. They've got like a way they do it. So the way this thing works is it doesn't actually take a picture of your fingerprint. It just observes the unique aspects about your phone and then stores a hash of that. This is according to Apple. Stores a hash of that in the A7 chip. Now here's what they're doing that's kind of interesting. That's an encrypted section of the A7 chip, the custom CPU they've built for this phone.
Encrypted to what key?
They don't say.
Encrypted.
And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing that I don't quite understand. They might not be able to extend this out to other applications because, according to them, they don't provide the fingerprint to the operating system in any way. Essentially, the operating system gets a passed or failed from the chip and then proceeds. So they're never providing the actual fingerprint to the OS. So I don't know if application developers are going to be able to take advantage of that, but they claim there's no way to get it off the chip.
Right.
No way for us to know since it's
Bunch
closed
of
source.
different stuff, but I don't know that it's better. The conversation on Twitter was interesting to see. One guy is like, I never thought I would hear all the security experts in an argument for four-digit unlock codes instead of something else.
Well, and I say, why not do both?
Right.
You know, because I think you can have it set to do
if you
fingerprint
had
and
an
code.
option to have both, sure.
Yeah.
Or something. But yeah, my question is, what do you do when this doesn't work?
Right. Well, it falls back to the pin.
Does
They
it?
don't. They don't even let you turn it on unless you set a pin.
Right.
So.
Okay.
And then they have like a system where
things.
if you fail the authentication a certain amount of times, it does stuff. I don't know. I think first of all, it's going to be a 1.0 product, so it's probably not going to work that good.
Exactly. And in the end, I'm just reminded of when I used to have a fingerprint scanner. And then I saw this episode of Mythbusters where they broke a bunch of fingerprint scanners with like photocopies of a fingerprint.
Yeah.
Or a photocopy of a fingerprint that they licked so it would conduct electricity.
Yeah.
Or, then there was a higher end, more expensive fingerprint scanner that they had to make a jello mold of a finger to beat it. Then there was a more complicated one that they had to do quite a bit of pain to defeat it, but they defeated it. And it happened to be the exact one that I owned.
I'll be really interested to see if they release more details on like if it takes heat readings and things like that. Because the thing that's interesting that kind of like puts us
Here's a question. If it takes heat readings, how does it work in Canada, outside?
or in Alaska, or,
winter.
I don't know. I'm just curious what they do. Like if they've like checked to see if it's got blood in there or what. Here's what I think could be the positive end of this. Is I think if anybody's going to get this right over time, I think it's going to be Apple because they actually bought Authentic and they owned them. They integrated them into the company and then they custom built this fingerprint reader for this purpose. So it's not like they're taking an off-the-shelf, like the Atrix just took a standard laptop fingerprint reader and bolted it on the back of an Android smartphone. And I don't think that's going to be a good implementation. I wonder...
Yeah, like HW Killer in the chat room was talking about, you can get most people's fingerprints off of their phone.
Right.
Because if you've ever looked at somebody's smartphone, it's just a giant mass of fingerprints.
Yeah, no kidding.
And on the Mythbusters episode, the way they got somebody's fingerprint was actually having them handle the jewel case for a CD. So they just handed them like a CD and they touched it. And then off that hard plastic, they got this nice, perfect fingerprint that they could extract. And to make their Jello finger that defeated it. And it's like, it seems like you could really quickly do that. It's like, if you were, say, the TSA at an airport, it's something you might be able to do in like 90 seconds to unlock a phone to do a data dump or something.
I think, like, for me, I would like to have this as a part of a two-factor authentication system, something I know, something I have. I think for Ange, my wife, she'd probably be happy with just to touch to unlock because she hates having a PIN. I actually hate having a PIN code too. In fact, I'm a little
so
afraid
used to it.
I'm afraid to admit it. I turned it off on my Android phone. It goes right to the desktop.
There's nothing sensitive really on my phone except for I guess a little bit of email.
Well, and now Google
but I
allows
still
me
have
to-
one on there just because I'm used to it. It doesn't.
I should for a lot of reasons. If I get pulled over and they take my phone or something like that. But now that I can remotely wipe it, I'm not as worried about losing it. So I just dropped it. Now it's gone forever, anyways. So yeah, I would say don't bet the farm on it, right?
Yes.
Let's keep an eye on it. But
it's an interesting thing, but I think it's more of a gimmick than a security feature.
kind of like Siri was a bit of a gimmick, but it has some utility.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But maybe it's part of a well-balanced security diet. All right, this next question, Alan, I'm hoping maybe you've got some sort of crazy answer somewhere. It comes in from Nathan Baum, or something like that. Nail the bomb, actually. Hi, Alan and Chris, longtime viewer of Last and TechSNAP, but I've taken a self-imposed break for a while. Shame on me. He's back now with a vengeance. He's getting caught up. He says, I really liked last week's Last where you featured Spider Oak and BitTorrent Sync. You also mentioned EvoMail app. This got me thinking about a problem when I'm rolling my own mail server. I really like Thunderbird as an alternative to Outlook, but I always falls down in one area, syncing contact info between the client and the mobile device. There were a couple add-ons for Thunderbirds, but they all got old and don't really work anymore. Google's got this built in if I submit all my information to Google and let them sync my contacts. But if I'm going to roll my own email server, what might somebody do to sync contact information? How, Alan, you guys have your own mail server for Scale Engine, right?
Yeah, although we don't sync contact information.
To the mobiles? Oh, okay.
Thunderbird has support for LDAP, and that's even most Exchange solutions. It's Active Directory, but which is just a modified version of LDAP. So a lot of higher-end mail servers will have LDAP. Like if you're using like an appliance type thing, it'll probably have LDAP in it somewhere. But yeah, that's the easiest way to sync the contacts, because that way you could have all your contacts not even necessarily just on your PC, but they be with your mail on the mail server. And then you can access, because for me, I have to sync the data for my mail and stuff between my PC, my laptop, my phone, possibly another PC. I have a workstation and a gaming station at my house. So there's 2 PCs, a laptop, and a phone that all need the same information.
I'm looking at my phone right now to see like what data sources it supports for syncing with. Interesting. I've installed the GNU Privacy Guard app, and that's one of the things that lets me. I don't know what sync it means.
Well,
it
would pull your key store, right? Because everybody's key has their email address in it.
So one of the options is mail, but I don't know. I don't think that does contacts. See, this is a problem I'm going to face because I think I've decided I'm going to roll my own email server here at the house, and if I switch my wife over that, this is something she's going to ask me. It's like probably her first question will be, okay, what's
if
my
you
email
use
address?
one of those like open source alternatives to Exchange,
Like Zimbra.
it probably has, Zimbra, I'm sure that has an LDAP server built in somewhere.
Oh, yeah. It's just a lot of server. I was kind of thinking of
Right.
making it lean and mean.
Right. That's what ours is. It's like postfix and dovecot.
I don't need contacts. I don't email anybody anyways. Like I email like a handful of people these days.
Speaking about email, the next episode of BSD Now, we're hoping will include an interview from 2 of the authors of OpenSMTP, which is an open source mail server.
Dude, speaking of email, we need you guys to double down on emails because we're shooting an extra TechSNAP next week. And we
cover the week I'm in EuroBSDCon.
Yep, and we need your feedback for that. So email us your questions, your concepts, or a war story. TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com. We've got that contact form. If you've been thinking about doing it, I'm putting the call out there. I'm pleading with you. Give us something so we have some good meaty feedback segments since we're recording 2 shows back to back. Also, join us early next week at 11 a.m. Pacific.
At 2 instead of 4 Eastern.
Yeah, so that'll be jblive.tv next week.
BusyBox42 in the chat room says Zimbra does use OpenLDAP, but the database is actually, the backend is MySQL.
Yeah.
So all your contacts are there.
Yep.
That's probably the most convenient way. I don't have much experience with it because honestly, the Google syncs my contacts for my phone from my Gmail, although my corporate email doesn't use the Gmail. So
wow, people in chat room
honestly,
know
I know the email addresses of the few people I'd ever have to email, and everybody else, it's a reply to an email they send me.
Wow, I shouldn't have said Zimbra out loud. I should have just done a Linux action show on it and surprised them all because people didn't know about it. I hate it when I give away a whole episode like that.
Yeah,
all
well, we
right.
didn't give away the whole episode. So,
Yeah, I know. I gave away the punchline. Chris T writes in with a home file server question, and man, I understand where he's coming from. He says, "Hey guys, thanks for the great show. I've got storage problems and I'm looking for some advice. Here's my background. In my main PC, I have 3 1-terabyte hard drives. My utilization is about 15%, 20%, and 85% respectively. I do not currently use RAID. Except for the RAID controller, I can put together a FreeNAS box. Except for having a RAID controller, I can put together a FreeNAS box with 6 1-terabyte drives. They're all standard 7200 RPM desktop drives, 4 gigs of RAM, and I got a LAN that's gigabit. Here's my first question. Number 1, currently I have full backups locally and critical data backups remotely. Do you think RAID Z2 is overkill?"
if he's going to have 6 drives?
6 drives, 1 terabyte. Each.
Yeah. No, I use Z2 at my house. Partly because ZFS's performance is better if the number of non-parity drives is a power of 2, so 2, 4, 8, or 16. So if you have 6 drives and using Z2, you get 4 data drives and 2 parity drives, because that'll mean the 128 kilobyte chunk will get split evenly between those 4 drives. If you do it as a Z1, you'll have 5 drives, and 128 doesn't divide evenly into 5. And it'll work, the performance isn't quite as good as it could be. But you get that extra 1 terabyte of usable storage, so it's kind of a trade-off,
Yeah.
Your drives are going to be able to saturate your gigabit LAN probably either way, so you can go with just Z1 if you want.
Okay.
So mine originally was a 4-drive Z1, and I upgraded it to a 6-drive Z2 by adding 2 more drives and only getting the storage of one of them. So that's 1 new storage drive and 1 new redundant drive. Because I wanted the more performance, because I'm actually building a test lab in my basement where I'm trying to saturate 4 gigabit connections at once.
All right, ready for question number 2? He says, is 4 gigs of RAM realistically going to work, or should I plan on at least doubling that?
Yeah, generally they recommend about 1 gigabyte of RAM for every gigabyte or every terabyte of storage. So with 6 terabytes, you'd want 6 gigs of RAM.
Okay.
More RAM is always better,
Yeah.
but 4, you can make it work. It's just, it'll always be faster with more RAM.
And you're also it's going to be a little tight for the OS, right? If you're talking about if that's just for the storage.
Well, ZFS doesn't use all that much just on its own. I have, admittedly, a bunch of servers where I've limited the amount of RAM ZFS can have to 1 gig.
Okay.
Uh,
That's all right.
Although on many of the machines, it actually uses 2 gigs because it can't prune stuff that's actively being used.
His third question,
So
you kind of already
4
answered.
will work, but I'd recommend getting 8 if you can at all.
So his third question you kind of already answered. He said, "Is ZFS with RAID Z even the best option for me? What about UFS or traditional RAID configuration or a JBOD?" Well,
A JBOD is just going to break.
Wouldn't he use a JBOD to? If he's coming in on his RAID controller, you want the RAID
Well,
controller.
I was under the impression that he said he had everything except a RAID controller.
Oh, right, he did. You're right. I thought he said he had it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you can do UFS without the RAID controller with software RAID,
Yep.
and ZFS is best not to have the RAID controller at all. The machine seems fast enough that ZFS, I would say, is great, but you could do it with UFS as well.
But don't.
If you could only have the 4 gigs of RAM, there's reasons why UFS might be better.
I don't know.
The other thing is ZFS performance goes down really sharply once it's more than 75% full. So if you have 6 1-terabyte drives and you're doing Z2, it means you only have 4 terabytes of space. And then, the usable space, because hard drive manufacturers lie when they say it's a terabyte, it's going to be less than that. And then you can only have 75% of that before it gets really slow.
So he's going to have like 3.6 usable, and he's going to fill that up pretty quick. Potentially. I mean, I would. So, yeah, maybe then go UFS if he's going to be running near capacity.
Yeah, so if you're going to have it closer to being full, then UFS won't suffer from a slowdown when it gets full.
Okay. There you go. That's good to know.
One sec. Yeah, so if it's got that much space. Yeah, so you have 3.6 usable from the ZFS, and then when you can only have 75% of that, it means you only have about 2.7 terabytes usable out of your 6 1-terabyte hard drives if you're doing Z2. And so yeah, if you're going to be kind of running towards full, then using UFS is better than ZFS.
There you go.
So because of our experience with that in particular, we decided at Scale Engine that some of our servers that only have like 500 gigabyte hard drives aren't going to put root on ZFS because that drive fills up too quickly.
Good to know. All right, Dev Null writes in, "Hi, Alan and Chris. I'm currently running failed ban on my server. My question is," and he said, "I've manually tested this. I get mail reports and have gotten them while manual testing on all monitored services. However, in actuality, I only get email alerts for IMAP attempts when I have it live in production. Is there any reason why only IMAP is being attacked? If it was a virus, I would expect to see sources more like local sources, but they tend to come from China and other countries, as well as other sources. I don't run SSH as root or on the default port, which explains why SSH logins. But what about
How can
FTP?
you run SSH not as root? But anyway,
Maybe if he's opening up a
yeah, you can't run SSH not as root, so I don't know what he
Yeah.
means by that. But anyway, the reason why you might only see IMAP, well, they could possibly be only attacking IMAP. Traditionally, IMAP was one that wasn't checked by failed to ban and so on until more recently. You know, the big ones were FTP and then SSH. And POP3 and IMAP tended to just be ignored. And then POP3 started getting attacked a lot, so people added it to their failed to ban configuration. But a lot of places don't necessarily monitor IMAP for failed login attempts. And so it means you can hit them a lot faster and crack people's passwords. People tend to use really, really, really bad passwords for their email, too.
yeah.
It's quite sad,
I guess
actually,
IMAP would
that
probably be a
people's
pretty
weakest
common to get
passwords-
banged on. But like
Yeah.
he mentions he has FTP and he doesn't see the door didn't get knocked there.
Right. That seems unlikely, so you might want to check.
Yeah, but he says in
Yeah,
testing
that
he
is
does
not-
see it when he tries it.
Right, but
Maybe you should check
can
his
look at the
firewall rules.
logs. Well, but you can check the logs on the machine and see if FTP is getting access
or the
at all or
firewall
not.
if it's got a firewall
Yeah.
in front of it. I mean, so if he runs, if he's running SSH on like port 2784, port 5000, maybe that's why SSH isn't getting banged on.
But some bots will still
Just
scan
scan.
and find that
Yeah.
and notice the SSH tagline and hit it anyway.
I mean, the bots.
So
yeah, the bots
putting
are
it on a
actually out
different
there
port, you still need to run fail to ban even if it's on a different port.
I agree.
But I'm still very confused by his comment about running SSH not as root because you wouldn't be able to log in as.
So if you're
any
running it as
user.
a non-privileged user on like port 5000, for example.
But how do you run SSH as a non-privileged user? Because you wouldn't be able to read the host key. You wouldn't be able to log in as a user other than the user running SSH.
Right.
And even then, I don't think you wouldn't be able to fork a shell as them. I don't think.
I don't know. I guess. I guess it would depend on.
I've never looked at trying to run SSH as someone other than root because you wouldn't be able to log in as any other user, and that wouldn't make any sense.
We had one sort of public service announcement that I thought we should get to. It's very important, very, very important. Came in from PT Herman on the subreddit. He says, Matt's going to wear a monkey suit for Halloween, but TechSNAP's actually being recorded on Halloween. So we want to know what we were going to do. Well, I think you and I might have come up with something, or at least the
Yes.
beginnings of something. So people can stay
Yes.
tuned for that. We won't spill the details on that just yet. All right, so there you go. Those are our emails this week, and we need more. So email us feedback, TechSNAP. Wait, what is it? Yeah, TechSNAP at JupiterBroadcasting.com. You just hit the contact link. It's much better because down the road we'll probably be getting monkeys that will be sifting through that for us. And I don't mean to call Rikai a monkey. I love you, Rikai. But anyways, we might have
You're a lovable monkey.
yeah, he's an IRC monkey guy, but not like monkey bad, like
Yes.
you know what I mean. I didn't. Now I'm gonna get in trouble. Now he's gonna delete everybody's emails, and we're never gonna get any feedback for the show. I've done it. I've ruined everything. So get your emails in while you can before Rikai's rage strikes them down. So hit that contact link and send them in so we get a whole bunch for our double ender next week. All right, Don. That's all the feedback this week, so that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. It's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them and give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. Do a little more reading. A lot of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, the first one was mine, and it was that Bruce Schneier one we mentioned, where he was writing for The Guardian, And he has a great guide, very long guide to staying secure. And he's got a few core points I just want to call out because I think these are the nuggets of it. Number 1, hide in the network. Implement hidden services. Use Tor to anonymize yourself. Number 2, encrypt your communication. Use TLS. Use IPsec. Again, while it's true NSA targets encrypted connections, and they may have explicit exploits in these protocols, you're much better protected than if you communicate in the clear. Number 3, assume that while your computer can be compromised, it would take work and risk on part of the NSA, so it's probably not. Number 4, be suspicious of commercial encryption software, especially from large vendors. And number 5, try to use public domain encryption that has to be compatible with other implementations. He's got a bunch of other great points in there, which I will link to you in the show notes. Okay, Alan. Now, you were talking a little bit about this one during the break on the live stream from ISC Diary.
Yes, so they've detected this new botnet, and it's quite interesting because it uses a host name that seems to change every second.
Wow.
And so they're having a lot of trouble nailing down what's going on because by the time they find it to go look at it, it's gone to the next address area.
Hell of a host name, too.
Yeah, and they appear to be some kind of hash based on the time and some other factors, and it's just all over the place. It's quite interesting, and they're asking for anybody who might have information or have seen anything resembling this. So if you have anything like that, you go out there and take a look and see what they say.
Well, Alan, good to know. I got to say, one of the things that came up in all of this NSA panic is what about LastPass? Because we've talked about LastPass a lot on this show. Yep. And they've, like a lot of companies are doing right now, they've taken to their blog, their corporate blog, and they've written up a little piece about LastPass and where it fits in with all of this. And they go on to say that they've never been approached and they never have weakened their software to allow NSA backdoors. The other thing they go on to say is that they do encrypt locally on your machine, so they're not holding the decryption key on their server, which I think is a good point. And they also mentioned that if you ever got a little freaked out, you can actually disable your LastPass account and then just use LastPass offline locally. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty good. And they remind everyone to create a strong master password. But if you are a LastPass user and you've been concerned about this, we have a link to that in the show notes. Still a big fan, recommended.
Yep.
All right, some good news for Atom processor fans. Hey, Alan?
Yes, Intel announced the new Atom Z3000 series. They don't support hyperthreading, but you can apparently do dual processor with them now. So you can put 2 dual cores on the same SoC and create a quad-core system.
Cool.
They seem to have about the same power envelope as before, but they have better power gating, so they could, like, when you're not being used, they use even less power. They look quite interesting.
Well, Alan, in the wake of the revelation that the black agencies in the U.S. have a budget of $52.6 billion a year, Google has announced they are encrypting their data to help fight against this. And this is, I think, more about the data in transit between Google data centers. Am I right? Have you followed up on this at all?
Not that much on this particular one, no.
So I'm wondering what your take is on this, because to me, good. I mean, I'm totally glad they're doing this. But what practical benefits is there? Because if they have the key...
so it stops the NSA from doing it over the wire. But,
right. The other thing is,
if the NSA comes in and makes Google give them the data anyway, then...
Yeah. If they have a subpoena and they're following the court process...
Right. Well, yeah. At this point, if they make it so that the NSA has to come and ask for it and can't just steal it, it means they have a record of every time the NSA's done it.
Yeah.
It has some benefit anyway.
The other thing that's kind of unique to Google, at least in the U.S., is they own like the majority of their backline for fiber. Like,
right, and so some of them, they actually have point-to-point links that don't go through any exchange.
Right. A lot
so
of
the NSA
them.
might not have a tap on those lines.
I feel like this is a tepid response to try to reassure people's trust in the Google Cloud.
Yes, I think it's Google trying to regain some trust.
But the reality is it actually probably isn't really going to benefit users, because if they're encrypting data when it's resting and they're encrypting data when it's in transit, that's good, but it doesn't actually solve any problem, especially since they have the ability to decrypt it on demand. So what it really need to be is...
Yes, but if the NSA doesn't, it provides some extra...
What would be great is if Google said, okay, you generate the key, Mr. Fisher, you hold the key, we'll hold the data, and when you want access to it, you have a client-side decryption process. Then I would be like,
that
good on
doesn't
you.
work for most Google services because...
They want to index it and crawl everything about it.
Well, not just that, but it does, then Google's not just providing you file hosting, right? Their services aren't about anything. Like, yeah.
It'd be nice though for like Drive, if I could have an option in Google Drive or in my Gmail for everything to be encrypted with me having the key. Just like I could if it was a client-side actual PC application. I could do that.
Well, I use like the Fire GPG plugin for Firefox, so I could write a Google Doc and then
Yep. And you could just paste it in there.
paste in the GPG encrypted version of it.
Good.
And store that in the Google Doc and confuse the hell out of people.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got a Seagate story in the roundup. Seagate's what are they calling this? Magnetic recording technology allows layers.
Shingled magnetic recording.
Oh, it's like shingles.
It's like the shingles on your roof. They're kind of overlapping. Basically, now with the current perpendicular technology that I think Seagate invented that as well. Actually, they can get data of up to 1 terabyte per platter, and they get 3 or 4 platters in the disk. But they can't really seem to get past that. The heads are as small as they can make them, and the tracks are as close together as they can make them, so they can't get any more data. So with this new one, the tracks will be stacked
layered
on top of each other, like the shingles on your roof. And the basic idea is that the read head is small and can read the tracks as they are with the overlap, right? Since half the track's covered up and half of it isn't. The read head only needs to read about half of the track to be able to read what's on the disk. But when you write, you need to write on the whole track. The write head is bigger because it's a harder job to set the magnetic bits and to read it, right? Mm-hmm. So the way it's going to have to work is it's going to have to rewrite the part of the data that overlaps on the tile that didn't get updated. Right? So the tracks are going to be on top of each other, and when you want to write on this track, you're going to have to rewrite the part of the data that's overlapping on this other track. So it'll have really interesting performance pathologies, I think.
Yeah, they're going to have some good cache on that
So
thing.
reading from the disk will be just as fast as it is now, if not faster. But writing will be slower.
I wonder if we'll see like a new...
specifically, rewriting will be the problem case.
You know how they have like the red drives? Maybe this will be like, long-term storage drives that are meant more for storage.
Actually, they're talking about a couple different lines controlling the amount of overlap. So if you're a drive that's primarily reading, you can overlap like all but the very minimum. But if you just need some extra storage, but you also can't have all your write performance go out the window, then you overlap only a smaller fraction of it. So by adjusting the amount of overlap, you can adjust storage versus performance. So it's not something you'll be able to just tune, but there'll be different lines of drives based on different amounts of overlap. So if you're something like Backblaze, where it's write it once and just read it from then on, you can have lots of overlap.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's more a different kind of drive, and if you really need performance, that's what SSDs are for, not hard drives. But
that's pretty cool.
It's also interesting to think how that's going to work, the rewriting penalty, if it's copy on write. Whereas ZFS, where you never are actually going to rewrite data in the same place. Right? Eventually that sector will have to be recycled, but it's not the same as a regular file system where when you update a file, it's going to overwrite the block in place.
Right.
ZFS is always going to write it to a new place. And at that point, it starts to make me think, what would the advantage be of implementing trim on a spinning hard drive? So that when that rewriting came up, it knew this block of data that I'm going to have to rewrite because I'm going to write the thing underneath of it, which will disrupt it. I know that that's not being used anymore because it's been trimmed by the OS. So I could just skip the penalty of rewriting it because it doesn't contain anything that needs to be rewritten.
Right.
But then, the amount of complexity that you're adding to the firmware and stuff, and it would have to somehow keep track of every sector and know if it's been trimmed and stuff. And it's like, is that extra complexity worth the possible small write speed gain? But spinning hard drives are still a thing, and this is maybe going to let us get to those 5 and 6 terabytes levels in a reasonable amount of time. By the sounds of it, 5 and 6 terabyte drives early next year.
Wow. I look forward to that.
Although I don't know if I want to buy the very first generation of those.
No, absolutely. Okay, so this one is about a shop called Gamehouse who makes their own installer for like Real Arcade and their other applications. And I guess there was an audit
it looks
done.
like they're kind of like something like Steam, but for silly free web games.
Yeah, like smaller scale stuff, right?
Yeah.
and I guess they did an audit of their installer and just found that it was riddled with all kinds of the most severe vulnerabilities caused systems with the Gamehouse installer to be wide open to attack, allowing websites to execute arbitrary commands on the system with the user's permissions.
Yeah, and this is what happens when you get game designers writing installers instead of real programmers and stuff.
Oh, all right. Now you've got a PDF linked in the roundup, and I always know that means that somebody's up for a good read.
Yeah, so this is from the University of Columbia. They have a paper called GPU Keylogger.
A GPU-based keylogger?
Yeah, so it runs in the GPU, so it won't show up on the process list on your Windows machine.
Oh, no.
Right? So it doesn't have to rootkit your OS to hide. It runs on the video card and uses the video card's DMA, or direct memory access, to be able to read when you press a key.
Somebody was hypothesizing this would be possible. Who was that?
Yes, and probably these guys.
And now we have it.
But yeah, they have a paper where they've actually have it implemented and working. And I'm not sure how agnostic it would be, but generally because it's just DMA access, this could be cross-platform. It would work on any operating system.
Oh, man. And I wonder...
And it stores your key log, the log of what keys you press, in the RAM of the video card.
And I was going to say, I don't know, but I think I've experienced, I don't think the video card's RAM necessarily gets always cleared on a system reboot. I think that's a power off.
Well, if it powers off...
During the restart, yeah. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that, but it's
Creepy.
definitely some interesting things there.
Not too surprising as we move more workloads there.
You'd have to have some software on the OS at some point
to load it,
pull the keylog out, right?
Yeah.
And you'd also have to worry about, you don't want the video card driver to be overwriting the log in the video card's memory.
I think Father in the IRC makes a good point. He's like, you combine this with WebGL and HTML5, user visits the website, WebGL element loads, stashes something in the GPU's memory, and Bob's your uncle. Next time you go back to the site, it downloads it, and that's creepy.
Could be some definitely some interesting things going there.
Yeah,
with your hardware working against you.
I mean, somebody like you who doesn't reboot, and like this,
I
this
reboot
machine here,
once every 2 months if I have to.
I think the uptime on this machine on the studio desk was 200 days before it restarted. So that'd be 200 days of keylogging.
Yep.
All right, Alan, the next story. Google, Facebook, Yahoo all amend requests today with the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, reiterating their desire to publish the numbers for request of user data that the National
Apparently we missed it. We should have talked about it last week. One of my FreeBSD servers hit 1,000 days of uptime last week.
Oh, congratulations.
It's at 1,007 days currently.
Oh.
When it gets to 1024.
Wow, so it's in sync with the show. It's in sync with the show. That's awesome. So I think it was last night, Mark Zuckerberg said that the government has blown it on this surveillance stuff. And then before that, Marissa Mayer from Yahoo was on stage, and she essentially said, if I had come out, so Arrington pinned her down during their TechCrunch conference crap, and he said, why, what's up with the NSA stuff? And she said, essentially, if I had said anything, they would arrest us under a treason act.
Yep.
That's Marissa Mayer saying that.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty incredible. All right, next story in the roundup. Censorship busters, the challenges of running a Pirate Bay proxy. Oh.
Yes, so this is an interview on Torrent Freak talking about the problems people have run into trying to run proxies to let people get to the Pirate Bay.
Yeah. There was, there's, the Torrent Freak has really been rocking it lately.
Yep.
They've really kind of stood out in this area. All right, Alan, our last story in the roundup for this week. Dun, 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 dun. Applause, please. Internet modem 0 day puts millions of PCs at risk.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Alan. A modem vulnerability?
Yeah, but I think this is in particular related to plugging your cell phone in over USB and using it to access the internet.
Yep, the USB internet modem allows users to connect GSM CDMA network via USB port, creating a PPOE connection to the user's PC. Researchers reported findings to the Hacker News exploiting the USB internet modem's vulnerability could remotely acquire shell, aka full access to the victim's computer. You'll see it. That's good to know. Dang.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about it, ironically, is a lot of people in corporations and enterprises use this kind of connectivity still.
Yep.
So you need to know. So if you're an IT guy, go patch your S, folks. Go patch your S. All right, Alan.
Well, and most of the software, it's like it's a driver that came on a disk with your phone or whatever, and you put it on your laptop,
Right.
and it hasn't been updated in years.
Yeah, super old.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget you can participate with the show by submitting a story or a discussion thread or just voting over at links.techsnap.tv. You can join us live. Normally, we're live at 1 p.m. Pacific, but next week we're going to be live at 11 a.m. Pacific, which is?
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Wait, no, not next week. Next week.
Oh, right. Yes. So that'd be 2 p.m.
Yes.
Eastern, 1800 UTC.
Yep. There you
Same
go.
time that BSD now is the day before.
Yeah, which you guys should also be watching on Wednesdays over at jblive.tv. And then we have the audio stream, jblive.info. If you're in the car, you're sitting at your desk, and you want something a little more low bandwidth, you can tune in there. And we always love to hear from you. Don't forget, we want more emails. So email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit that contact link. All right, Alan, well, I think we're all done, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks for the great show. And thanks to everyone out there for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.